Is your HOA always? This fair. Paper slaps, my wife's windshield gate hinges groan, and suddenly her parking permit is under review. Within days, HOA. Karen threatened to tow her car letter after letter, all per state directives like they owned my wife's schedule and safety. Then, Emily laid her state auditor badge beside that permit projector, clicking on council lights glaring down, and proved the state had never backed their threats. Next week, refund checks hit mailboxes. My wife's permit hung steady under fair rules, and the clubhouse went quiet. By the time I got home, the sun was sliding down behind the roofs, turning the whole parking lot the color of old pennies. My knees popped when I swung out of the truck. Another long day at the shop, another evening rolling into Maple Ridge. That's when I saw it. A sheet of white paper was pinned under the wiper on my wife's car. Not mine, hers. Right there on the windshield, dead center like a target. I walked over, boots crunching on the cracked asphalt. Up close, I could see the logo in the corner, a little maple leaf, and a little house lines too clean for anything but a committee. Maple Ridge. Townhomes. Homeowners Association. Big, bold block letters across the top. Notice review of your parking permit. Possible revocation. The words were sharp enough to raise my blood pressure all by themselves. Behind me, I heard a car door shut. Emily stepped out of the passenger side of my truck, stretching her shoulders, the strap of her laptop bag cutting across her blazer. Her hair was pulled back in a quick knot, a few strands stuck to her forehead with the humidity. "What's going on?" she asked. I pulled the paper free from under the wiper and handed it to her. "They left you a love letter." She scanned the first line, then dropped her gaze to the middle where the important part always hides. Permit, holder, Emily Turner. Under that, another line, failure to comply may result in revocation of your parking permit and towing at owner's expense. Her eyes stopped there. For a few seconds, she didn't say anything. The air conditioning units on the back of the buildings hummed in chorus. Somewhere down the row, a dog barked twice and shut up. The parking lot felt like it had leaned in to listen. Emily looked up at me, then back down at her own name on the page. Her thumb brushed over the word revocation like she was testing if the ink would smear. "This isn't about you," I said quietly. "They're going after your spot." She blew out a slow breath. "They're going after my permit." I glanced at the car at that little plastic tag swinging from the rearview mirror. My wife's parking permit, her name printed in neat black letters, the space number in red. Without that tag, she'd be hiking from the overflow lot at 11 at night, walking past the dark end of the property alone. We'd fought hard to get that permit when her shift changed. Doctors, notes, emails, forms. It wasn't some trophy. It was her safety hanging from a $2 piece of plastic. Out of habit, my eyes drifted to the front porch of the corner unit where the flag always flew. The stars and stripes hung limp in the heavy Texas air, sun-bleached on one edge. The smell of somebody's BBQ drifted over the fence, smoke and meat and lighter fluid mixing into something that would have made me hungry any other night. Metal clanged behind us. The row of mailboxes by the sidewalk had just snapped shut on its spring. I walked over, twisted the key in our box, and pulled out a small cream-colored envelope with the same little maple leaf logo in the corner. HOA again. I didn't even open it. I just slapped it against the notice in Emily's hand the way you stack bills that all smell like the same problem. "You've got fans," I said. She huffed a humorless little laugh. "Yeah, real devoted." A pair of headlights washed over us, then slowed. A white Lexus eased around the curve of the lot, tires whispering on the pavement. It rolled to a stop just short of Emily's car. The driver's window slid down. "Evening," a woman's voice called bright and sugar-coated. I didn't need to see the HOA logo on her polo shirt to know who it was. The haircut gave her away. Blonde bob, perfect angles, not a strand out of place. Her clipboard was already propped on the steering wheel. "Evening. Paula," I answered. She smiled like we were old friends bumping into each other at the grocery store instead of standing in front of a threat. "I see you found our notice," she said. "We're doing a review of certain parking permits." Certain, I repeated, like my wife's. Paula's eyes flicked to Emily, then to the tag on the mirror, then back to the paper. "If your wife doesn't comply," she said, still smiling. "We may have to revoke her permit. The board has to be consistent." Emily straightened a little. "Comply with what, exactly?" "Oh, updated standards," Paula said, waving her pen. Like that explained everything. Visibility usage, impact on community harmony, that sort of thing. "Funny," Emily said. "No one mentioned new standards when I renewed my paperwork last month." Paula's smile held, but I saw the tiny twitch at the corner. "Well, things change," she said. "We're just trying to keep Maple Ridge looking orderly." She scribbled something on her clipboard. The Lexus idled, throwing warm air at our legs. "Round here," I said, watching her write, "they don't pull guns. They pull paperwork." For the first time, Paula's eyes met mine in a way that wasn't neighborly. Just for a heartbeat. Then the smile snapped back in place. "We'll see if your wife's permit still qualifies by the end of the week," she said brightly. She put the car in gear, turned the wheel with 2 careful hands, and drove off toward the HOA office. The taillights glowed red, then disappeared around the building. The lot went quiet again. I looked at the notice. At Permit Holder. Emily Turner. At the bold threat about towing at our expense. Emily folded the paper along the printed lines and slid it into her bag like evidence, not trash. They didn't just go after a spot, I thought, feeling the anger settle into something heavier. They went after my wife's name on that permit. By the end of the week, the mailbox had turned into a loaded gun. The first morning after that notice, I walked out in my work boots, coffee in one hand, mail key in the other. The metal boxes lined the sidewalk like tiny gray doors. I twisted ours open, and there it was again. Cream envelope, maple leaf logo in the corner, my wife's name printed dead center. To Emily Turner, parking permit holder. I held it between 2 fingers the whole walk back like it might leak something. Emily was at the table with her laptop open, hair still damp from the shower, a mug of coffee cooling by her elbow. "Round 2, I said, dropping it in front of her. She didn't answer right away. She just slid her thumb under the flap and tore it clean. Inside, new letter. Same logo, same format, different tone. "This is a courtesy reminder that your wife's parking permit is under review due to updated community standards." "Courtesy," I muttered. "That's one word for it." Emily read in silence, jaw working. The letter went on about visibility from the street fair use of reserved spaces and ensuring harmony within the community. Somewhere in the middle it dropped this line. "The board is currently evaluating which permits may no longer qualify under our stricter guidelines." No date, no reference, no actual rule. They wrote, "Your wife's permit," like they owned her parking spot and her schedule, I said. Emily's mouth twitched, but she didn't smile. She folded the letter, once slid it under a magnet on the fridge, and went to work. 2 days later, it happened again. Same walk, same boxes, same cream envelope with her name. This time, the print on the front seemed darker, like the printer had been turned up to threat instead of notice. She waited until I sat down across from her at the kitchen table before she opened it. I watched her eyes move line to line. I didn't need to read it to know the temperature had been cranked up. Her grip tightened just enough that the paper creased under her fingers. She laid it flat and read out loud, voice, even, final warning. "Your parking permit may be suspended. Below that, failure to comply may result in revocation of your wife's parking permit and towing at owner's expense." There it was again, your wife's parking permit, like the HOA was addressing me personally while aiming at her. She set the letter down carefully side by side with the first one. 2 identical templates with the tone sliding from fake polite to sharp. "How many warnings do they send before they just do it?" I asked. Emily lined the edges up with her fingertips, eyes on the names printed at the top. Permit holder. Emily Turner. Permit holder Emily Turner. Saturday morning there were 3. It was early enough that the light coming through the blinds still had that gray-blue tint. The smell of coffee and toasted bread filled the small kitchen. The only sound was the low murmur of the news on the radio, some anchor talking about gas prices and football. Emily sat at the table in an old t-shirt and pajama pants, damp hair hanging down her back. She had lined the 3 letters up in a neat row on the table, white against the faded wood. Her name sat in the same place on each one like they'd used a stamp. She wasn't reading anymore, just staring. Her hand rested on the 3rd letter, the one with final warning screaming from the top. From where I stood by the counter, I could see the slightest tremor in her fingers. Not fear, not exactly. It was the shake of someone who knew this wasn't just rude, it was wrong. The air conditioner kicked on with a hollow rush. Outside, I heard our older neighbor, Mr. Lawson, shuffle down his front steps in slippers to pick up his newspaper. He caught my eye through the window and gave me a little nod, the kind of nod men of a certain age use instead of words. I nodded back. We both went on pretending everything was normal. It wasn't. Later that morning, I slid into a corner booth at the Cedar Glen Diner while Emily finished getting ready for her shift. The vinyl seat sighed under my weight. The waitress topped off my coffee without asking, leaving the pot behind on the warmer. The bulletin board by the door was full of curling flyers and handwritten index cards. Lost dog, yard sale, church breakfast. Right in the center, pinned straight with a red thumbtack, was a fresh sheet of paper. HOA meeting. Thursday, parking policy review. What can I get you? Jack, the waitress asked. Just coffee for now, I said, and maybe a new HOA. She laughed on reflex, not really hearing me. A man about my age slid into the next booth, glancing at the board as he passed. He waited until the waitress moved out of earshot before leaning back. You live over at Maple Ridge, right? He asked. Yeah, I said. Why? He jerked his chin toward the flyer. Heard Paula's stirring up your side first. Friend of mine's wife lost her guest permit over there last month. Got 3 letters in a week, all final warning. Sound familiar? My jaw tightened. My wife's on number 3. He nodded slowly. HOA. Karen's been threatening other wives' permits too. You're not the first. It landed in my gut a little heavier than I wanted it to. This wasn't just Paula picking at us because she didn't like my truck or Emily's hours. This was a pattern. I paid, took our to-go cup for Emily, and drove back home with the radio low. The whole way that phrase rolled around in my head, your wife's parking permit, like the HOA had bought the right to decide how safe she was allowed to feel coming home. When I walked back into the kitchen, the letters were still there, lined up on the table. Emily sat in front of them, elbows on her knees, hands clasped. She looked up when she heard me. For a long moment, we just stood there, the 2 of us, and 3 pieces of paper that said too much and nothing at all. She picked up the last one again, the final warning, and read the middle paragraph, lips pressed together. Then, almost more to herself than to me, she said quietly, Funny thing, Jack. I work with the state, and nobody told me about these guidelines. At 6:15 a.m., the world should have been quiet, just sprinklers ticking somewhere down the row and a few porch lights still fighting off the dawn. Instead, I heard a diesel engine growling low in the lot and the sharp metronome-like beep, beep, beep of something backing up. I stepped onto the upstairs landing, still pulling my shirt over my shoulders, and froze. A tow truck was angled across the reserved spaces, yellow strobes flashing against the townhome walls. The driver was already crouched at the rear wheel of Emily's car, sliding a metal hook under the axle like this was a perfectly normal Tuesday morning. Her parking permit, my wife's parking permit, hung from the mirror clear and untouched, swaying gently in the early light. I hit the stairs fast. Hey, I shouted, boots hitting asphalt. Get away from that car. The tow driver straightened slowly, expression blank in a way that told me he'd rehearsed it. He pointed at Emily's windshield with the detached attitude of someone following orders he didn't care to understand. HOA flagged this one, he said. Temporary suspension notice. They sent me to tow. Suspension, I stepped closer. Her permit's right there. The guy shrugged. Says the permit's temporarily invalid. Look, man, I'm just the hook and haul. Notice is there if you want to read it. A large red paper had been slapped on the windshield sometime in the night. It was crooked like someone had stuck it on in a hurry, and it half covered yesterday's original notice. Emily hurried down the stairs behind me, hair still damp, work bag bouncing against her hip. She stopped when she saw the hook under her car. What is happening? She asked, breath catching a little. HOA called a tow, I said. They're saying your permit's invalid. Her eyes flicked to the red notice, then to the driver. I need to see the paperwork, I said. The actual order. Who approved this? He jerked a thumb at the windshield again. That's what I got. I reached up and peeled the red notice off. The glue made a soft ripping sound, leaving a smear on the glass like a stain on our morning. Across the top in bold print, temporary suspension notice. Parking permit invalid. Under that, in smaller text, your wife's permit is temporarily invalid per state directives. Even before Emily reached my side, I heard her inhale, not loud, but sharp. Nothing about that wording belonged to any agency I'd ever dealt with. No state seal, no statute number, no case reference, no contact this office. Just the tiny Maple Ridge HOA leaf in the corner pretending to be an official emblem of the government. Behind me, I heard Emily's bag creak as she tightened her grip on it. Silence pressed down on all of us. The rumble of the tow truck idled. A bird chirped once and went quiet. Even the gate at the far end of the complex seemed frozen mid-hum. Then the gate slid open and a beat-up blue pickup drove in. It parked near the garages and Cal, my neighbor. Weathered face, faded veteran cap stepped out with a styrofoam cup of coffee. He saw the tow truck and changed direction immediately. "What's going on?" he asked. I held up the notice. HOA says Emily's permit is suspended per state directives. Cal took the paper, squinted at the text, and read the keyline twice. Then he snorted. "The state doesn't write like that. No seal, no docket number, no statute. This is someone playing dress-up with authority." Emily came beside me. Her voice was steady, but I knew her well enough to hear the steel under it. "Can they tow it?" she asked. Cal looked at the tow driver. "You got anything besides this paper? Actual order? Any city reference code violation?" The driver shook his head. "Dispatch said HOA suspension. That's it. If you've got a problem, take it to them. You hook that car," Cal said, "and you're part of whatever this turns into." The driver looked from Cal's cap to Emily's badge clipped on her bag to me standing square between him and her car. Finally, he unhooked the chain with a sigh. "All right, I'll mark it as disputed. HOA can call the state themselves." He climbed into his truck, backed out with another sharp beep, beep, and rolled toward the gate. The moment the truck was gone, the lot felt different, quiet, but in a tight, coiled way. I looked at the red notice again, the ink sharp and heavy. In my wife's world, I thought every lie leaves a receipt. 30 minutes later, we were in my garage. The air smelled like old oil metal shavings and the burnt toast I'd scraped out of the shop toaster a week ago. My AM radio buzzed with a talk show about property taxes. A chipped mug sat on the compressor steam, long gone. Emily opened her laptop on my workbench, the red notice flattened beside it. She photographed both sides, scanned it in, and labeled a new folder, Maple Ridge, my wife's permit. Cal leaned against the doorway, arms folded. Emily highlighted the phrase per state directives, and her jaw tightened the way it did when she found an inconsistency during an audit. "This wording is wrong," she said. "No agency uses this, no format matches, no jurisdiction listed." She clicked open a fresh document. "They just turned my wife's parking permit into state business," she said quietly. And now she added, eyes narrowing at the screen. "We treat it like state business." The email hit Emily's inbox at 6:42 a.m. No greeting, no explanation. Just a subject line that felt like a countdown dropped straight into our kitchen revocation of your parking permit, Emily Turner. And the first sentence, your parking permit will be revoked within 48 hours. Emily read it once, then again. The glow of her laptop reflected off the stainless steel sink, throwing sharp blue edges across the room. "They're accelerating," she said quietly. I leaned over her shoulder. The email wasn't from the city, not from any agency. It was a Maple Ridge HOA address with a thin attempt at formality. Per state guidelines, your permit no longer meets updated compliance expectations. Same vague language, same trick wording, same misuse of the word state. "They're doubling down," I muttered. By noon, word had spread across the neighborhood. People wandered toward the clubhouse like moths drawn to fluorescent light. I followed the slow ripple of residents heading that way, some clutching coffee, others pretending they were just walking by. Paula stood at the front under a faded striped awning clipboard hugged tight to her chest, a smile painted on like she'd practiced it in the mirror. "Thanks for coming to our info session," she announced. "As we transition into stricter parking policy enforcement, some wives' permits just don't fit where this neighborhood is going. Some wives' permits." She said it like they were accessories. Optional. Replaceable. I caught two men exchange a look, one uncomfortable, one annoyed. "What about the state guidelines you mentioned?" someone asked. Paula didn't blink. "We are aligning with them. It's our responsibility." It sounded rehearsed, memorized, empty. Through the clubhouse windows I saw the bulletin board with pool rules and BBQ hours, everything the HOA controlled laid out like commandments. But nothing, absolutely nothing, about any new state directives. I walked back to our parking row with the sun low behind me, long shadows stretching across the asphalt. Emily's car sat in her assigned spot, the same one she'd parked in for 3 years, the one she came home to at 11 p.m. after late shifts. Her permit still hung there. Familiar. Steady. Except for the new addition, a little plastic 48-hour countdown tag clipped beside it, the kind HOAs used for temporary passes. On ours, someone had written 48 hours. Standardize or suspend. It dangled there in the warm breeze like a threat on a timer. "Standardize," I muttered. "What does that even mean?" Emily ran her finger over the numbers, not touching them long, almost like they were hot. "They're trying to create urgency," she said softly. "Fake urgency." That night, the house felt too quiet. No TV, no music. Just the steady tick-tick from our old diner-style wall clock and the occasional hum of the fridge. Emily sat alone at the kitchen table. Her laptop glowed against the dim room, turning her face half-lit, half-shadowed. The 3 physical notices sat on one side of her computer. The HOA email sat open on the other. I could tell she wasn't overwhelmed. Emily didn't do overwhelmed. This was something else. Calculation. She was connecting dots the way she did at work, eyes narrowing as patterns started forming. A silent beat stretched between us. I stood by the counter, arms folded, watching her scan each line again. The only sound was the soft click of her computer mouse. Finally, she exhaled slow and controlled. "They misrepresented the state," she said. 3 times. In writing. Her tone had shifted, no longer shaky, no longer defensive. More like a scalpel finding the right line to cut. I pulled out a chair and sat beside her. So, what now? She turned the laptop so I could see a fresh document. She'd started the cursor blinking at the top like a heartbeat. Her eyes locked onto mine. They invoked the state over my permit. That makes it my job to answer. There it was, the microcliff moment. The shift from reacting to acting. I leaned back, letting the weight of her words settle. "They picked the wrong wife's permit to threaten," she added, voice steady, almost calm. Paula didn't know Emily's job. She didn't know the audits, the oversight, the paper trails Emily handled every week. She didn't know that per state guidelines was the kind of phrase that triggered mandatory review, mandatory reporting, mandatory documentation. Paula had brought a clipboard to a state auditor's doorstep. And now Emily was done waiting. She pulled all the notices into frame, photographed them one by one under the kitchen light, the red suspension, the warnings, and the original note from the windshield. Then she opened a new email draft. The subject line formed slowly, deliberately. "Formal request for city hearing, misrepresentation of state authority over my parking permit." I watched her hands hover for a second, measuring her next step the way a carpenter checks the line twice before cutting. Then, send. The click echoed louder than it should have. The clock ticked again. The countdown tag on her car hit hour 0 in 48 hours. But the HOA's timeline didn't matter anymore. Emily had just moved this entire fight into a jurisdiction Paula couldn't manipulate with a clipboard. The clubhouse was already full when Emily and I stepped inside. Folding chairs scraped against the vinyl floor, the kind that always carried the faint smell of chlorine from the pool next door. A projector hummed overhead, throwing a shaky blue rectangle against the pull-down screen. The first slide read, "Parking Policy Clarification," in alignment with state guidelines. A lie on page 1. I took a seat near the aisle. Emily sat next to me back straight, her tote bag zipped tight with her permit folded inside. People whispered around us. Boots tapped. Styrofoam coffee cups clicked. The room had the tension of a church basement moments before a heated vote. "We now call this meeting to order," Paula announced. HOA. Karen herself stood at the microphone with a clipboard, a stack of papers tucked under her arm like ammunition. She cleared her throat dramatically. "Over the past month, we've had issues with several spouses' parking permits. The state is backing these changes. Some wives' permits were never meant to be permanent." A few people shifted in their chairs. Someone coughed. Someone else muttered, "Always the state. This the state, that." I kept my hands folded. Legal confrontation requires patience, and tonight was the first of 2 confrontations. A man in a windbreaker stood. "My wife got a boot on her car last Tuesday. She works late at the ER. Why is that suddenly against the rules?" A woman at the back added, Paula, "You threatened to tow my husband's truck. He's parked in the same spot for 6 years." Paula held up both hands, palms out. "We are simply enforcing state expectations." There it was again. State. Like she owned the word. Emily's jaw tightened beside me. She hadn't spoken yet, but I could feel the moment building the same way you sense a summer storm shaping itself behind the tree line. Silent beat. The room hushed on its own. No microphone feedback, no projector noise, no shuffling. Just the faint drip of the coffee urn and the hum of ceiling lights. Emily brushed a crumb from her skirt, then slowly lifted her hand. A dozen heads turned. Paula stiffened. "Yes?" "Emily." Emily stood. Calm, composed, her voice steady. "I have a question. A very simple one." She let the silence stretch a beat longer. She knew exactly how to command a room. "Which state office reviewed my wife's parking permit and your rules?" "Minnie, Cliff?" The guy next to us whispered, "Good question." Paula blinked too fast her tell. "The state office. State officials plural." Emily tilted her head slightly. "Names." Paula cleared her throat. "They requested anonymity." This time the murmurs grew. Chairs shifted. Someone at the back snorted. The HOA secretary tapped nervously on her laptop, fingers shaking just enough to betray the discomfort. Emily didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Funny, because every agency my team works with has sign-off procedures, email trails, and actual jurisdiction. Parking permits inside private subdivisions aren't under state oversight. An older man near the coffee table nodded vigorously. "She's right." Paula straightened her blouse as if that might straighten her credibility too. "We were told verbally by state reviewers." Emily cut her off with a single question. "Who told you that question hit the room like gravel in an engine?" Artifact moment. The HOA secretary typed loudly enough for the whole clubhouse to hear. Paula stated that state officials had reviewed the parking policy and permits. There it was. In writing. In the minutes. And, because I'd set the recorder app on my phone, also in audio. My heart thumped once clean and sharp. This wasn't just a neighborhood dispute anymore. Cultural anchors drifted through the room. Dry cookies on a folding table. A giant silver pot labeled community coffee. A whiteboard with fading marker. Property values. A frayed red, white, blue bunting drooping over the exit sign. All of it looked suddenly small next to the weight of the words Emily had just pulled into daylight. Paula tried to regain control. "We'll move on." But the room wasn't with her anymore. Not after that. People exchanged looks. A couple murmured about filing complaints. Someone whispered, "They made it up. The whole state thing." I leaned toward Emily as the meeting adjourned, the chairs screeching back across the linoleum. She exhaled low and steady. They said, "State officials, Jack, plural, on the record." I nodded. We needed proof. She gave the smallest tired smile. Now we have it. As we stepped out into the cool night, she whispered a line that sent a clean surge of justice through my chest. Finally, someone fought back. Then she added quieter but sharper, "Now we have their lie in writing, and in audio." Cliffhanger. Tomorrow, those words would walk straight into the city hearing, and Paula had no idea what Emily did for the state. City Hall always smelled the same old paper-cheap cleaner and the faint trace of coffee that had sat on a burner too long. That night, the lights in Public Hearing Room B were already blazing when we walked in. The state flag hung on one side of the dais, the U.S. flag on the other. Rows of wooden benches creaked under the weight of neighbors' city staff and a handful of Maple Ridge residents who'd decided to see how far this mess would go. A sign outside the door read Public Hearing Room B, Open Session. Inside, a projector hummed, filling the front wall with a fresh slide. Preliminary Review. Maple Ridge, HOA, Parking Policy Presenter. Senior State Auditor. Emily Turner. I watched Paula step through the doorway and stop dead when she saw the slide. Her shoulders went rigid under her blazer. The guy next to her, Greg, one of the board members, leaned in and whispered, not as quiet as he thought, "She's a what?" I sat in the second row close enough to see the tendons in Paula's neck tighten. Emily walked to the table at the front, calm as a surgeon. She wore her work badge on a simple lanyard, the state seal clear and official. On the table in front of her, she set two things side by side. A printed copy of her parking permit. Holder, Emily Turner. A thin, bound packet on formal letterhead State Auditor's Office. Preliminary Review Findings. My wife's parking permit. Senior State Auditor. The title of this whole nightmare finally locked into one scene. The city council member acting as chair adjusted his glasses. We'll now hear from Senior State Auditor Emily Turner regarding Item 4B, complaints relating to Maple Ridge HOA and alleged misrepresentation of state authority. Emily adjusted the microphone. The click echoed just enough to make people look up. "You've been threatening my parking permit," she said, voice even based on state authority you don't have. No anger, no shouting, just a simple surgical cut. The room seemed to lean forward all at once. She clicked to the next slide. On the screen, the HOA email appeared in blown-up text. The subject line was hard to miss. Revocation of your parking permit. Emily Turner. Underneath, highlighted in yellow, per state guidelines, your permit no longer meets updated compliance expectations. The slide after that showed the red temporary suspension notice from Emily's windshield with one line magnified. Your wife's permit is temporarily invalid per state directives. Silent beat. Nobody moved. Nobody shuffled. You could hear the faint staccato from the court reporter's little machine on the side table, and over that the soft clatter of a council member's pen slipping from his fingers and dropping to the desk. Tick. Gravity. Reality. Emily let the silence sit just long enough to hurt. The state auditor's office initiated a preliminary review, she said, after I filed a report on these documents. Our mandate requires us to investigate when state authority is claimed in writing for enforcement actions that might affect citizens' rights or safety. She flipped a page in the packet, the motion slow and precise. Our findings are simple. She clicked again. New slide. Finding number 1. No record exists of any state office reviewing or approving Maple Ridge HOA parking rules. Click. Finding number 2. No record exists of any state office threatening or authorizing revocation of my permit. Click. Finding number 3. Language used by Maple Ridge HOA, specifically per state directives and per state guidelines, was not based on any communication directive or guidance from this state or its agencies. Greg's face had gone pale. Paula stared at the slide like maybe if she didn't blink it would go away. From where I sat, I could see the cheap tissue box perched on the witness table. Someone had taken one halfway out and then changed their mind, leaving it hanging like a white flag that never got raised. Let me be clear, Emily continued. You invoked the state to justify towing threats and revocation threats against my parking permit and others. You used phrases that implied official backing you never had. That's not a misunderstanding. That's misrepresentation. The chair nodded slowly. And your office's recommendation, Emily clicked again. The slide showed a bulleted list. Cease all references to state directives as guidelines unless supported by written state communication. Rescind current parking permit suspension threats. Refund any towing, booting, or penalty fees collected under misrepresented state authority. Submit revised policy to the city attorney's office for review. Minnie Cliff. She looked straight at Paula. We find no record of any state office reviewing or approving your parking rules or threatening my permit, she said. None. A murmur rippled through the benches. One man in a work shirt nodded satisfied. Someone in the back muttered, "Knew it." I watched Paula's hand creep toward her own stack of papers, knuckles white. Whatever speech she'd brought was useless now, and standing there at that worn wooden table under fluorescent lights, my wife didn't look like just another resident trying to keep a parking spot. She looked like exactly what her title said she was. Turns out the scariest thing in that room wasn't a tow truck. It was my wife with a microphone. The chair cleared his throat. The record will reflect that Maple Ridge HOA claimed state review that did not occur, he said. The city attorney's office will follow up on possible sanctions. We will also strongly recommend compliance with the auditor's findings. He nodded at Emily. Thank you, Ms. Turner. As she gathered her papers, I caught the smallest flicker on a couple council faces, respect and something like relief. Finally, someone had pulled this thing into daylight and nailed it down line by line. Finally, someone fought back. The hearing adjourned with the dry crack of the gavel. People began to stand, benches creaking, voices low and buzzing. The court reporter packed up her machine. The tissue box stayed mostly full. Paula didn't look at us as she walked toward the exit. Her clipboard hung at her side now, not like a weapon, more like a weight. I stood, waited for Emily by the end of the row, and together we stepped into the aisle. As we turned toward the door, I looked back at the long table where she'd just spoken. The permit copy still lay there on top of the report, her name printed twice, once as parking permit holder. Emily Turner, once as Senior State Auditor. Emily Turner. The woman who'd spent weeks threatening my wife's parking permit had just been read into the record by a senior state auditor, and this time the record was not on her side. A week after the hearing, our mailbox looked like it had swallowed a month's worth of mail in one day. Envelopes crammed tight edges bent from the pressure. Several had the same printed logo in the corner, Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. But these envelopes felt heavier. Emily opened the box and let out a small breath. Jack. They actually sent checks, and they had. 5 of them, each labeled restitution for improper towing, booting fees amounts ranging from $45 to $300. Every check came with the same line printed at the bottom, issued pursuant to findings presented by Senior State Auditor Emily Turner. Then came the thick envelope, creased, bulging, too formal. Emily slid a thumb under the seal and unfolded a 4-page letter. Across the top, "We apologize for threatening your parking permit without proper authority." They didn't bold it, but they might as well have carved it into stone. I watched her read line by line. No grand theatrics, just quiet acknowledgement. Quiet victory. By noon, the parking lot looked like some kind of neighborhood festival, people crowding around mailboxes, holding refund checks, trading stories like baseball cards. A man in boots waved a check and said, "They booted my wife's car 8 months ago. I paid cash. Didn't think I'd ever see a dime again." A woman who'd always avoided conflict murmured I was scared to speak up. Thought they'd tow me next. And then someone added, "Guess it took the state to knock them down a peg." Paula wasn't there. Word around the subdivision was that she'd resigned that morning. Someone taped a new sheet to the bulletin board by the mail kiosk, HOA Board Elections. Emergency session tonight. Beside it, someone had stuck a sticky note. Finally. Later that afternoon, Emily sifted through the pile of envelopes on our kitchen table. She found one small white envelope addressed solely to her, to Emily Turner. Parking permit holder. No apology on the outside. The envelope didn't dare speak until she opened it. Inside was a single-page letter. Your parking permit has been fully reinstated. Your permit is no longer under review. No further action is required from you. The formatting was sterile, but the message wasn't. The state had cleared her name by exposing the lie, and the HOA had been forced to admit it. Silent beat. Emily didn't sit. She just stood there beside the table holding the reinstatement letter with one hand, the other resting lightly on the stack of restitution checks. Her shoulders eased. Her eyes glistened a little, but her smile, small, tired, relieved, held steady. "They really folded," I said quietly. She shook her head. "No." They finally told the truth. Outside, the neighborhood didn't look tense anymore. Kids pedaled their bikes in loops around the cracked asphalt. Someone fired up a grill. Sweet BBQ smoke drifted across the lot. A couple old-timers leaned against a pickup truck reading their refund letters like they were lottery winnings. And behind all of it, on the diner bulletin board downtown, a fresh flyer flapped in the breeze: HOA election tonight. Community participation encouraged. You could almost feel the neighborhood's spine straightening. That night, the election meeting filled the small community room to the walls. A coffee urn hissed in the corner, and someone had brought stale donuts in a grocery store box. The room wasn't angry, not anymore. It was awake. A man I'd never heard speak at a meeting before stepped up to the microphone. For years, he said, voice steady but thick with something real. We thought we just had to eat whatever the HOA served us. People nodded. A few clapped. Someone murmured, "Not anymore." "Minnie Cliff," he added. "We forgot we're the ones who live here, not them." After he stepped down, Emily looked at me and exhaled. It wasn't exhaustion. It was the first clean breath she'd taken in weeks. Nearby, an older resident leaned toward us. "Tell your wife something for me," he said quietly. "What's that?" I asked. He smiled, a tired but grateful smile. Finally, someone fought back. Emily overheard and offered him a small nod. She didn't need applause. She'd already won the only battle that mattered: the truth. Back home, I carried the reinstatement letter and the new printed permit out to the garage. The fluorescent light buzzed above me, flickering once before settling into a steady glow. I opened the car door, leaned in, and clipped the new permit onto the rearview mirror. It swung gently, reflecting the soft glow of the parking lot lights outside. Same plastic, same shape, same barcode. But everything behind it, authority, truth, respect, was completely different now. I stepped back and looked at it shine. "Same piece of plastic," I whispered to myself. Whole different power behind it now. The diner was half empty that morning, the way it usually was between the breakfast rush and the retired crowd's lunchtime shuffle. Vinyl stools squeaked when you sat down, and the big front windows let in the kind of pale daylight that made everything look a little colder than it really was. I sat at the counter with a mug of coffee, warming my hands. The steam curled lazily upward, catching the fluorescent lights above. Out of habit, I checked the parking lot through the window. Emily's car was right where she always parked it. And there it was, hanging calm and steady from the rearview mirror, my wife's parking permit hole, unchallenged, protected by rules that finally made sense. I let that sight settle in my chest. A moment later, a man I didn't know took the stool 2 seats down from me. Carhartt jacket, tired eyes, the look of someone who'd spent too long trying to keep the peace with people who didn't deserve that much patience. He ordered a black coffee, thanked the waitress softly, then pulled a crisp envelope from his coat pocket. The HOA logo flashed before he even unfolded it. His face changed: brows, dipped jaw. Clenched lips pressed together. He muttered, not to anyone in particular, "You've got to be kidding me." That tone, that look, that exact sinking feeling. I knew it too well. Hook right on time. He glanced my direction, maybe because I was the only one close enough to hear him breathe out sharply through his nose. Then he said it barely above a whisper. "They're threatening my wife now." I turned slightly. "HOA." He nodded and exhaled something between a laugh and a groan. "Says her flower pot is the wrong color, and if we don't correct it, they'll note it on her parking record." Parking record. Like she's some kind of repeat offender. He held up the notice. The same cheap paper, the same pompous formatting, the same smug font choice the Maple Ridge Board had used on us. My stomach tightened not with fear this time, but recognition. The pattern was too familiar. A different HOA, different offense, but the same playbook. And for one long beat, neither of us spoke. Only the sound of a spoon tapping the rim of a coffee cup and the low buzz of the diner's tiny radio filled the space between us. Silent beat. Just breathing and truth. Outside the diner window, Emily's permit swung slightly in the breeze as someone drove past. Solid. Safe. Hard won. I took a sip of coffee and finally said, "I've seen that letter before." Almost word for word. He blinked. "You're kidding." "No, that's the same tone Paula used on us. Different HOA, same scare tactic, make it sound like they've got more authority than they do." He looked confused, then hopeful. "So, what happened with yours?" I told him. Not all at once, piece by piece, the way you'd lay out tools on a workbench before tightening the first bolt. I told him about Emily's notices stacking up like threats, the bogus state directives, the tow truck Dawn, the fake suspension, the 48-hour ultimatum, the HOA meeting where Emily cornered the lie in front of a room full of witnesses, and the city hearing, public recorded undeniable, where she presented the truth as plainly as a blueprint laid out on a counter. I didn't embellish, didn't dramatize, didn't soften, just told him what happened clean and straight. By the time I finished, he was staring at his notice like it might dissolve if he glared hard enough. Then he asked the question everyone reaches eventually, the real mini cliff, so, "What am I supposed to do?" I nodded toward the letter in his hand. First I said, "Get your facts straight. Keep every letter, screenshot every email. Don't throw away a single envelope." He nodded. "Second, check whether what they're claiming is even in their bylaws. Most of the time it's not." Another nod. And third, I leaned slightly closer, lowering my voice the way someone had once lowered theirs for me. "Don't be afraid to push back." Viral line delivered steady. "Get your facts straight, keep every letter, and don't be afraid to push back." He let out a slow breath. Relief mixed with a little fire. The right kind. He unfolded the notice fully and slid it toward me. I looked at the header, the font, the language, the layout. I didn't need to read more. I'd lived this format already. Pattern repeated. Artifact HOA, shush, whatever. Same style, same act. He said quietly, "Feels like they want us scared." "They do," I replied. "But scared doesn't win." The waitress topped off our coffees, calling both of us hon as she moved down the counter. Sunlight hit the bulletin board by the door. Church potlucks, veterans assistance flyers, a missing cat notice all pinned together like the nerve center of a small-town ecosystem. I finished my cup and stood, leaving a couple bills under the saucer. Outside, the breeze was crisp. I walked toward Emily's car permit shining under the street lamp like a quiet victory flag. As I pulled open my truck door, a thought settled in clear. Steady, the kind that doesn't fade. Outro, voiceover, cinematic soft, but tense. If you're staring at a threat to your wife's parking permit right now thinking you're alone, you're not. Finally, someone fought back. You can, too. And for the first time since all this started, the neighborhood felt like a place where people might actually stand their ground. Walking out of the diner, I watched sunlight catch the posted order on the community board and the clean shine of Emily's reinstated parking permit hanging steady in the lot. It reminded me how a single hearing room, a single seal on a formal notice can pull the truth back into the open when people try to bury it. We didn't just fix a permit, we reset the boundaries of what a small neighborhood can get away with when nobody pushes back. And somewhere between the refund checks and the quiet nods from neighbors, you could feel something heal. Finally, someone fought back. Share your HOA story below your map might help someone redraw theirs.